my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a different kind of video, at least a video I haven't really seen. Not that it's all too inventive, I'm not that creative on this channel, let's be real. But one of the things on BookTube that I see a lot is people talking about their favorite upcoming releases for the year. There's some of my favorite videos to watch because I learn about books that I didn't know about. It's where I get hyped and excited for books that are coming out during the year because there isn't like a collective video where people talk about the 2020 releases after they've read them. All of those 2020 releases reviews are scattered throughout their channel, which makes perfect sense. That's how it works. So sometimes I forget what books came out during the year. I forget, did this person read it or end up not reading it yet? What were their thoughts and opinions on it? Oh yeah, that book came out in 2020. Do I still want to read it? Am I still looking forward to it? All that kind of stuff. But since we never get like a full wrap-up recap of 2020 releases, I thought it would be such an informative, great video to do is to talk about what 2020 releases I did read, which ones I'm still looking forward to reading, and then in the comments you guys can remind me of ones that I forgot about. I just thought a recap video of the 2020 releases I read made sense for an end of the year video, and I'm really excited to do it. But without further ado, let's get into the 2020 releases that I ended up reading this year. There's a couple ways that I could kind of break up the reading. I'm going to talk about some graphic novels, then we'll get into the adult releases I read, and then we will finish with the YA reads. So without further ado, let's get into the comics I read. I'm not discussing mangas because they're ongoing series and they're not technically originally published in 2020, but one of the comic books I read was Check Please Volume 2. I think this came out during the summer, I want to say, but this is the final concluding Check Please volume to the Check Please duology, I guess. This was originally a webcomic. It's following this young boy as he goes to college and as he kind of comes to terms with being gay, and it's just super sweet, super cute. Highly recommend this series, and I really liked this concluding finale. It kind of expanded the world, expanded the characters, and it was so joyful and wonderful. Another 2020 release was Fence Volume 4. You can see there's kind of a theme in the graphic novels I pick up. Sports graphic novels, sports queer graphic novels. This was a comic book I had no idea was coming out. The first 3 trade issues were scheduled, I don't know, 2018, 2019, and there hadn't been news if Fence had gotten picked up for more, and then it was released, I want to say in 2019, that yes, the series was popular enough it would be continuing, but they were on hiatus until like a weird book came out by a different author. I haven't read that yet, and then this came out this summer and I didn't hear about it until like September, which I just thought was really funny. Yes, this is a fencing comic series. It has very gay vibes to it, and I think there will be a romance in the future, and I really like this. It might be a little cliche, a little typical, but it's everything I want. Now that the comics are out of the way, let's get into the adult books I read. One of the books I read this summer was Upright Woman Wanted. I'm not sure when this came out during the year, but I want to say like spring-ish time, maybe earlier. But this is a short little novelette, novella type thing, and it's like a post-apocalyptic world where it's kind of reverted back to Western time, and there are these librarians that are like these secret undercover agents that are like trading information and people, and they're pretty much like all queer and lesbians, and it's great. Like I've alluded, I really like the setup, I really like the world, but ultimately this novel ended up being a little bit of a disappointment for me. I thought it was going to be more lyrical. I thought like it would have more to say about things. I don't know. I just thought it was going to be more literary than it was, and it was more just a fun romp novel. So I ended up giving this like a 3 out of 5 stars. Next I have Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. This is a sci-fi novel, and it is about this young woman who gets involved with aliens. If you are familiar with Lindsay Ellis's content on YouTube, especially like her video My Monster Boyfriend, if you like that Lindsay Ellis, I don't think you will be surprised by the direction of this novel or like what happens in it. I'm not super big into first contact stories. I'm not super big into alien sci-fi, you know, especially when the aliens are just like out to kill humans for no reason pretty much. But I really enjoyed this. I think in part because I am familiar with Lindsay Ellis's content, so I did know kind of what this book was going to be. I thought this was a very successful first novel. I thought that the science fiction part was really accessible. I know other people had issues with it, but for me personally, I understand it. I liked the characters, I liked the aliens, and yeah, it made me excited to explore more sci-fi because I think I might actually like it more than I think I do. And I ended up giving this like a 3.75, 4 out of 5 stars. It was good, a great debut, but it wasn't like the best book I read this year, but I'm excited for the sequel. The next book I have on here came out very early. I want to say January February, so like COVID, and that is Come Tumbling Down by Shannon McGuire. And this is a continuation of the Wayward Children series, and this is the 5th book in that series, and it kind of explores more about the Wayward School and some of the familiar characters. Book 1, 3, and 5 kind of more connect to each other, and there's like more of an ongoing story, whereas 2 and 4 are more backstory books. I personally really enjoyed the first book and the backstory books. I did like this a lot more than the 3rd book, especially because it has more about Jack and Jill, who are 2 of my favorite characters. I love this series. It's like literary, fiction-y fantasy, so just like all the prose is like dripping with like meaning and beauty, and I love this series. It's so good, and I know it's not for everybody, but I personally love it. Going back to sci-fi, we also have A Beautiful Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. This is the sequel and concluding novel to An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I read that, was very shocked and surprised how much I loved it, and had to come back for the sequel, and this is a chunky book. I don't know if it's just my paperback is super thin, but like this book looks like ginormous sitting next to it on my shelf. I really ended up loving this. I love the characters. I love what this book has to say about like humanity. Again, it's a first contact story, but I feel like the aliens and how it explores first contact is very different than like an action movie, so it's a lot more engaging like on a humanitarian level, I guess. I'm really surprised by Hank Green. I don't know why I'm so surprised that I love his novels so much, but I hope he continues writing because I really did love this book. The next book we have on here is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is a contemporary romance novel. Contemporary romance is not a genre I pick up often. There's very few books that really interest me in here, but I was really excited for this because I really do love her first 2 YA novels that she wrote. This kind of took the world by storm. A lot of people were reading it and enjoying it, and I enjoyed it as well. It's carefully constructed. The characters are deep and flawed. The romance is sweet and steamy and everything you could want. Like, it's the perfect romance novel, and I get why people give it a 5 stars completely. But for me, reading it, I don't know if it was the timing I was reading it. I don't know what it was. I just didn't feel connected to it at all. Like, I thought it was perfect, but I personally just like wasn't having like an awesome time reading it, if that makes sense. I don't think the relationship could be crafted any better, but at the same time, I just personally didn't connect with the relationship or the characters that much. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. A great book, a book I would recommend, but maybe just romance isn't really for me. And then the last adult fiction book I have on here is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. I'm actually currently reading this book right now. I have about 30 pages left in it. I'm really enjoying it. I think this is a great novel. It's very different, very weird, very plotless. I don't think a lot of people are going to like this, and I don't think that this book is necessarily always marketed to the right crowd, especially like when you look at Goodreads, like this does not have a high rating. I personally think I'm going to be giving this a 4 stars. I'm pretty locked onto that. I don't really know how to describe this or explain why it won't work for people. It's weird because it's about the characters, it's about the plot and what's going on and everything, but I think this book is much more about the feeling it gives you. But this book is about a young girl who goes to a secluded, secret college boarding school type experience. The house that she lives in is very mysterious and weird, and I don't know, I like this. One more adult book, and that is Follow Me to the Ground by Sue Rainsford. I think I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Again, this is another weird book, another shorter book. This is about like this father and daughter who are creatures, like they're not human. They're like made of the earth and stuff, and they live in this like small town. This almost has like a gothic, southern gothic feel to it in a way. It's slow moving, it's weird, a little gross. By my Goodreads rating, you can see that I liked this book, but I didn't love it. Personally, I had a little bit of a difficult time trying to understand exactly what this book was trying to say by the end. So I liked a lot of the prose, I liked a lot of the concept and like what was going on, and I liked it. I didn't love it. But if you like weird stuff, this is for you. But let's get into the 2020 YA releases that I read. So starting off, we have Sword in the Stars by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. But this book is King Arthur in space with a female King Arthur. There is a sapphic relationship. Pretty much everybody is queer in this book. This is like a kind of queer, diverse space romp of King Arthur. I'm trying to think about the best way to describe this book, but honestly, this book is bonkers. Like, so much happens in this series. I liked the representation. I liked a lot of the ideas in this book, but it didn't didn't really come together for me. And in this book, I was kind of prepared for that crazy ride, and I ended up enjoying it a little bit more just because I could kind of just like let it wash over me, let the craziness wash over me. And I thought that the writing had improved a little bit in this book. Not much, but a little bit. But anyway, if you're looking for something with great diversity, great representation, if you like really plot-based YA novels, this is definitely for you. For me, it's like an average book. It's like a 2.5 stars, 3 stars, but I can recognize that it's a fun time and that other people would really, really enjoy this. Another 2020 release that I read was The Midnight Lie by Marie Rutowski. This is like a spin-off continuation of the Winter's Curse series, Winter's Kiss series, and this is like happening 20, 30 years in the future on like secluded island with a different cast of characters, but it's like in the same world. And you know, every sapphic white girl was talking about this and was in love with this. I'm not the exception, okay? I get why people were kind of like rolling their eyes when everybody was like gushing about this book, but like also, I love this book. It was so good. I gave this like a 4.5 stars. The character interactions, the complexity, the nuance. I know some of the relationships are maybe not the best, but that complication makes them so fascinating and interesting, and I like this book a lot. Fantasy, sapphic, and character driven. This is what I want in fantasy, so this was for me. I liked it a lot. Another sapphic read from 2020 was Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashadoust. I read Melissa Bashadoust's first novel, which was Girls Made of Snow and Glass, but something was missing for that book for me personally, and I felt similarly about this book. There was so much I loved, the character dynamics, the world, but I did end up feeling like something was missing. I just wanted more of the character interactions. I wanted this book to be longer. This is a Persian-inspired fantasy world, fantasy book, and it's exploring this young princess who has a poisonous touch, and so she's kind of been isolated from the world, and she comes into contact with these two thieves. I'm trying not to spoil too many things, but yes, I loved this book. I loved the like love triangle, relationship triangle. It was just excellent. I loved how the characters mirrored each other, but again, just like certain things, I just wanted a little bit more from this book, and so I ended up giving it like a 3.5 stars. It's weird because I loved this book so much. I want to give it a 5 stars, but like it just wasn't quite there yet, which is so sad. I like this book a lot. Definitely recommend. Getting into another 2020 fantasy, I have Ray Bear by Jordan E. Fueco. This I gave a 4 out of 5 stars to. It is an African-inspired fantasy world. What I really found interesting about this fantasy setting is that there's like different little like countries that make up this like kingdom, and each country kind of has like its own ethnicity, its own like heritage and makeup and look to it, which was just really cool to read. Like there was an Asian, Korean inspired area. There were obviously a lot of countries that were based off of African nations, but there was also like a Scottish nation. This is following a young girl who goes to the main kingdom, and she's kind of like testing in to be a Ray Bearer, which is like this council group that like help the king, and they all have like special abilities and they're like connected by the Ray. It's a very interesting, fascinating magic system. I like all the character dynamics. I really like how this author subverts very typical YA tropes. There is an ace character in here, which I loved that representation. I really loved a lot of the characters in here. So good. And I'm looking forward to the sequel. I'm not sure if this is a duology or a longer series, but I loved this first book and I'm excited to see where it goes because it left off in a very interesting place. Definitely would recommend this. Since we just did fantasy, let's get into some urban fantasy I read. One of the urban fantasy 2020 releases I of course read was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This story follows a young trans Latinx main character, and he's struggling to fit into his family, and his family is of course a bunch of magic users who live in a cemetery. The women have special healing abilities while the men lead the dead into the next life. And of course, Yadriel, the main character, believes that, you know, he should be out there with the ghosts because he is a man, but his family doesn't necessarily see him that way because he is trans. So it's about like this crazy ghost adventure, but it's also like this internal family driven story, and I love this. I think I gave it like a 4.5, 5 out of 5 stars. I thought this was an excellent debut. I loved the characters' interactions. I loved the magic and the world. This was a great book. It was so good. And I'm definitely looking forward more to what Aiden Thomas has to write because this was great. And then another ghostly urban fantasy I ended up picking up was Alastair by Darcy Littlebadger. And this takes place in a world that is basically the same as ours, except magic exists and everybody knows it exists. Our main character, Alastair, or Ellie, has the power of her great grandmother, and that is the power to like bring back ghosts, and she brings back animals. She has a beloved ghost dog. When her cousin ends up dead, her and her family go on a journey to figure out who killed him. Again, this book had some ace rep, really loved that in there too, and the main character and her family are indigenous. I loved how Ellie's family mythology and just like her history were wrapped into the magic of this world. It was so great to see. I feel like this book is not being talked about enough, and I'm not sure it's because urban fantasy just like is kind of a hit or miss for a lot of people, but I personally would definitely recommend this. I really loved it. I gave it like a 4 out of 5 stars. I think again this was another strong debut novel, and I can't wait to see what more this author puts out. And so let's get into some YA contemporaries that I read, one of which would be I'll Be the One by Lyra Lee. This is about a fat Korean American girl who is auditioning to be on a Korean X Factor type show to be a Korean pop star. This book is a romance. It's a fun, idle competition adventure story, but a lot of it is dealing with, I would say, less about accepting herself, because she really much does accept herself, but it's more about getting the world to accept her, or at least respect her, because she does want to dance and sing as a Korean pop star. So this book talks a lot about America's fat phobia, but also Korean and their beauty standards and their internalized fat phobia. I really loved this book. I really liked that not all the relationships ended up perfect. I thought this was a little bit heavy-handed, but for the most part it was fun, it was magical, the romance was super cute and fluffy, and I just really loved Sky, our main character, and this cover is adorable. It's so cute. I love it. It's such a pastel dream. The next YA contemporary I have is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is a coming-of-age high school story about a young black girl who has to try and be nominated as prom queen so that she can get some scholarship money so that she can go to the college of her dreams. This story is so much more than that. It's a cute romance. It has such great commentary. I loved Liz's family and their dynamic and how that came into the story. There was just so much good stuff about this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I know this is going to be on a lot of people's favorite list. Yes, it was hard-hitting, but it also had so much joy in it, and it was just so fun to read. Definitely recommend it. Another beautiful, stunning cover, and if you haven't heard about this book enough, you need to pick it up, because again, sapphic book, another sapphic book. We had a trans male-male romance, we had a book with ace rep, we had a bi character in an MF relationship, and we have a sapphic relationship. And to finish it off, let's get into Felix Ever After by Casing Calendar. This has a male-male relationship with a trans boy, and Felix is also bisexual. This is about Felix, who is kind of like this messy high school kid. We all had those messy years, can relate. But he's growing up in New York City, and he's dealing with some transphobia from some classmates. Also, his relationship with his father is not great. So it's kind of Felix's struggle with that, with like some internal feelings that are going on, and him accepting himself. But it also, again, has a very cute, nice romance. This romance is a little bit more messy. There's kind of like this big love triangle in it, and I honestly thought this was going to end with a poly relationship. I love this book. It was so heartwarming, endearing. Again, hard-hitting elements in it. It's great. It's fantastic. Definitely recommend. But those were all my 2020 releases that I read. Everything pretty much knocked it out of the park. I don't think I had any 2-star reads on here. Everything was a 3-star or higher, besides Once and Future. And even the 3 stars, I thought they were very strong, really good books that I would definitely recommend. So let's look at some of these 2020 releases that I'm still excited for. I have Pinterest lists, so I'm going through that, and hopefully I am picking up on things that came out in 2020. I believe I am. One of the first things that like just came out this month was The Office of Historical Corrections by Daniel Evans. I just read Daniel Evans' first short story collection, so I'm very much looking forward to this one. The Space Between Worlds. It's like a sci-fi with like parallel worlds in it, I believe, and it has a black main character. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is like a horror story with like Native American main characters. I also want to read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a high fantasy novel, I believe. Again, written by an indigenous person. There's Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This is like a horror gothic novel about a young girl, I think, dealing with mental health issues. There's Horrid by Katrina Leno. Again, horror gothic-ish. I don't know that much about that one, except I love the cover for it. Loveless came out by Alice Oseman, which is an Arrow Ace story. Very excited about that. The Black Flamingo came out. That is, I think, a novel in verse, and that book is about a black gay boy discovering drag. If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha is about beauty standards in Korea. There's Grown Alone by Tiffany Jackson. That is about a young girl in the music industry and kind of like the hardship she faces. I think there might be discussions of like sexual assault. There's Plain Bad Heroines. I'm so excited for that, by Emily M. Danford. Again, a gothic horror-esque novel. The Vanishing Half and It's a Fun Age. I think both of those came out in 2020. Both of them are like adult literary fiction. Not my typical genre, but they both sounded really interesting when I heard about them. Stay Gold, which is about a trans boy going to a new high school. Those are all the ones that are kind of coming to mind that I can see on my like Pinterest board. But I know there's so many others that I'm forgetting about because this was like such a good year for publishing. There was so many queer books, so many good books talking about different issues. I know I'm forgetting so many because there were so many good ones. If there are 2020 releases that you read or ones that you want to get to, tell me about them in the comments down below. I would love to hear about them. Definitely let me know what your favorite 2020 release was. It's so hard because there's so many good 2020 releases that came out that I still want to read in the next couple months, I guess. But again, there's so many 2021 releases that are coming out that look so good too. It's so hard to like keep track of what are coming out every year. Backlisted books, hard to keep track of as well. Some people stay on top of the 2020 releases and I kind of hate them because like I wish I could do that, but I think I did pretty well this year. I read a lot of 2020 releases, but I'm hoping in 2021 I can stay on top of these new releases because it was really fun to read them as people were talking about them as they were coming out. And maybe if I can keep this trend going of actually making videos, then I can actually do reviews and talk about those 2021 releases. But anyway, this is the end of the video. Again, comments. I want to know about your favorite 2020 releases. I really do. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later and happy reading.